Our keynote speaker this morning is Emmanuel Gobillot, who will be examining leadership, collaboration, and innovation. Mr. Gobillot started his career in financial services. Observing that the organizations he worked for drew a stark contrast, he came up with one conclusion: there must be a better way to lead. There must be a better way to engage an organization's creativity, passion, and drive. And there must be a better way to relate to our customers. Please join me in welcoming Emmanuel Gobillot.
Thank you. I feel distinctively underdressed today, I have to say. Thank you so much. It is such a pleasure and an honor to be here today. I always feel somewhat of a fraud when I come to speak at any type of medical event. I think the only reason I should ever be on stage at a medical event is as a warning to children as to what not to do. Also, I have to say I am French, and this means I have a strange accent for which I apologize. I've been told many times I should just say I'm French and I apologize, because I guess there's a lot of things us French people have to apologize for. That is humbling to be here on stage, sharing the stage with people who matter a lot in our communities, the people who bring us into life, the people who keep us into life and help us pass through life. And I have to say that as a researcher on leadership, I haven't got a job which has that much of an impact on society. In fact, my children describe to their teacher when asked, "What does your father do?" My daughter said, "He sits at home and looks at the computer the whole day," to which the teacher replied, "I'm so sorry to hear your father is unemployed." But that's what I do. For the last 20 years or so, I have been looking at leadership and thinking about actually how do we engage the people around us. And one of my main concerns, and the concern people have when they do my job, is what picture do you put on your opening slide? Now, that's a critical thing for us, because you want your opening slide to engage people. And I thought, well, I'll go with the child in medical outfit, because that's kind of cute. It is cute, it is also really dangerous. Do not let a child operate on you. So I thought, actually, I need to go more professional than that. I thought I'm going to go for the professional look. This is more kind of open door rather than keyhole surgery, I guess. But then I have to also admit that I have no idea how most of those bits operate. So I couldn't lie to you. So I went for my version of medicine. And that's kind of where I feel safe. What I want to do with you today, my to-do list for today, is really covering three things. The first one is I want to define leadership. I want to try to get to the core of what it means to be a leader. I then want to talk about some of the trends that are impacting the world of leadership and that are making our job so fundamentally different from what it used to be. And finally, I want to share some thoughts on ideas as to what this better way to lead might be, some of the ideas that I've come to develop over the years. So let me start with defining leadership, and I'll start with my definition, which is here. Now, I need to tell you a bit about why this matters. I was doing some work with Google. I was in San Francisco. Anybody from San Francisco? A couple of people, you'll know what I mean. I was in San Francisco and I got into the hotel. Catherine, my partner, was traveling with me. We decided to make it a bit of a holiday coming over from London. We arrived after a long flight, got into the hotel, checked into the hotel. I went to switch on the light and I got really excited. Here was something which to me was the best definition of leadership I had ever seen. Now, I got really excited. I said to Catherine, "Isn't that amazing?" At this stage, I was thinking, this is fantastic. She's thinking, what did I ever find attractive in that man? I And I called reception, and this is why it matters that it was in San Francisco. I called reception. I said, this is marvelous. I have just seen your light switches. Now what I would like is, could you please show me any of the rooms you have in the hotel which have nobody in? Now anywhere else in the world, they would have said, no, go to sleep. In San Francisco, they said, sure, because that's the kind of people they are. So they took me to every single room which was free in the hotel, and I studied the light switches on probably about 4 floors. Now what was exciting to me, and this is not because it's a light switch and leadership is about giving light or clarity or any of that stuff, what became really exciting for me were the screws. Because I realized at that stage that all the screws were lined up. And the reason I wanted to go and check the other rooms was I wanted to make sure that somebody had consciously lined the screws up. I wanted to see if you had to line them up, if it was one of those things that automatically happened, or somebody went to the trouble of lining the screws. Now, what I discovered through my research is that actually on the 6th floor where we were, all the screws of all the light switches were lined up. On all of the other floors, they weren't. Some were straight, some were cross, and so on. And that to me is leadership, because somebody went around the rooms and thought, I tell you what, nobody ever notices those things, but it doesn't cost anything to just line up the screws. I'm going to go that extra mile. I'm going to go that bit further and line up the screws. Now, as I say, most people don't even notice the screws, but just think for a minute. If you've got to have an electrician in your house, don't you want the person who lines up the screws? Because you know they're going to take their shoes off when they come in. You know it's the same person who is going to make sure that every single detail of your house electric installation is going to be just right. And that is what I call discretionary effort. Not just the effort that we have to put in order to get the job done, but this extra effort, which is at our discretion, of doing more than we thought we could do, doing more than is required. And that, to me, is the result of great leadership. Leadership is really about ensuring that we engage the people around us positively, in their positive engagement with the goal. Not just doing it, but doing it in a different way, in a positive way. Now, the way we do that is through what I call the perception of support and challenge. Now, many people say to me, well, actually, perception doesn't sound quite right. It feels kind of Machiavellian. It feels like you're manipulating people. That's not what I mean. The reason I say it's their perception is because what you do doesn't really matter unless they have the outcome. What we think we do is irrelevant if that's not what they felt and experienced. So sometimes I see people say, oh, I've been really supportive. If the person doesn't think they've received support, then it really doesn't matter what you think you do. So actually, it's their perception which matters. And the way we can achieve that is through the taking of personal risks in our life. We want to follow the people for whom the goal matters. If the goal doesn't matter to our leader, then why should it matter to us? And in many ways, you know this. I was looking at the pledges that were given this morning. And actually what I did is I tried to isolate some of the words from these pledges and organize them in by the way, now if you PC users, you can't do this, okay? This is a Mac move, I'm just saying, okay? I'll just do it again, okay? I'll just do it again, just so you can see. Look at that. Now that's called magic move. Now, I'm sorry, if you buy a Mac, you have to sign a thing saying, I will tell everybody I've bought a Mac. So the point is that actually, if you look at the words that are coming through those pledges, they are that definition. They are about ensuring the positive engagement of others. They are about challenging and support. They're about taking personal risk. They're about standing up for something. And so when we go through this meeting this morning, it is not about leadership as in I'm the CEO or the VP, or it is leadership in all of us. Our ability, each and every one of us, to challenge others to be the best they can be. And if that's the definition, then what matters is we need to understand them, not just us. It's amazing. Every time I get on a plane, people say to me, what do you do? And I try to explain about leadership, and they said, oh, what do great leaders do? That's always the first question people have. What do great leaders do? Tell me, what's the secret formula? What do great leaders do? And I always say, A, I don't know, and B, that's not the question. The question shouldn't be what do great leaders do? The question has to be what do great followers want? Because that's the question that matters. How do we get people to follow? And it's not just about us, it's about them. So let me share some of the trends that are going on in the world around us that are important for us to understand if we are to engage people. This is the state of the world as it used to be. It was great. The economy would provide. We would receive gifts for which we were thankful until this happened sometime around 2007, 2008. Now, I realize we have children in the room. This is not true, okay? Just rest assured, he will be back. I know this is the home of Coca-Cola, where they gave us the red Santa Claus. But suddenly it felt different. Suddenly we knew that actually there were some issues that we had to deal with. That suddenly the economy wasn't in the state it always was, that things were becoming difficult, and that is globally. And this world started to change in 4 ways, 4 trends, which we have to bear in mind. Now, the first one, I call it the demographic trend. I tried to sum it up with some pictures. This is a BMW plant in Germany, where BMW have had to start health programs at work. Now, the reason they've had to do this is because an assembly plant for cars was built for workers of an average of 35 years old. The workers are now an average of 50-odd-year-olds. The plants weren't designed for them. They have to be helped in keeping the plant working. Now, this used not to matter so much, but actually as we are working longer, this matters a lot more. Now, not only is there an older working population, a younger working population trying to emerge, but we also have a global population. This is a startup I met in Canada, Ant Vibes. Ant stands for Audible Name Tag. Their entire business is about putting a sound file on emails and websites where you can click and hear somebody say their names. Now, if you think about it, there is no reason why this business should exist if you're French, living in France, amongst French people. Because everybody knows that my name is pronounced Emmanuel Gobillot. Now, if you travel anywhere in the world, nobody seems to realize that the L's and the T are silent. So I become Emmanuel Gobillot, all right? Now, that doesn't bother me so much, but it bothers my mum. So, Ant Vibes, put a little sound file, and then you can just click on my website, and you hear me saying Emmanuel Gobillot. Now, if you think about it, this kind of business is magical in the world we live in today, because the people alongside you are completely different. They come from all over the world. You just have to look around this room and see the flags against the wall to know that actually this kind of thing starts to be interesting and starts to have value. Now, another thing about diversity, this is an advert for Microsoft. The one at the top is the American version, the one at the bottom is the Polish version. You will notice that in the translation, the man in the middle went white. If you look carefully, you will also notice his hand, however, stayed black. Which, I guess, tells you a lot about Microsoft's ability to use Photoshop. But the issue... So we've done the Mac and Microsoft thing. But the point is this, you could get away with this quite easily years ago. In fact, Ford did it. A lot of companies used to do that. You used to tailor your advertising to the market you operated in. This is no longer possible. This was on Twitter within about 5 minutes of it being out. I mean, another one which is interesting, this is the Ikea Catalog. On the left-hand side is the UK version, on the right-hand side is the Saudi version. You will discover that in the Saudi version, all women have been removed. The child between the UK and Saudi lost his mom, which I guess is wrong on so many levels. But the point is this, diversity is not something that you can now ignore. We live in a world where the people alongside you have a fundamentally different background from the one you had. Now, for leaders, this is interesting, because if you think about it, we lead out of experience. We lead in a certain way because the people who taught us led in that way. Now, if the people at your table have nothing in common with you, you have a problem. Their understanding of leadership may be fundamentally different from yours. Your leadership may be alien to them. So it's a trend which is raising a question about, well, actually, what does it mean for me when the people alongside me no longer understand what is behind what I do? The second trend I want to talk about briefly is expertise. Now, the expertise trend is interesting to me because the world of work is changing. Our models of organization, our models of how work gets done are peeling away. They don't seem quite right anymore. We have so many new models emerging, anything from mass customization. On the left is mymuesli.com. Now, clearly, I am not a muesli lover. I am more into mycroissant.com, I guess. But if you're into muesli, you go on to mymuesli.com. You can tailor the muesli the way you like it. You can put bananas and fruits and chocolate or whatever else you put in, bird seeds, I don't know. Put whatever you want, and then they will send it to you at home, and it'll have your name on it, and it'll be your muesli, mass customization, all the way to Wikipedia, which has now fully replaced my general practitioner. I now go to my doctor knowing what it is that I have. I am just waiting for him to give me the prescription pad so I can prescribe myself with what I know I should have. Don't you hate that? The people who sit in front of you say, I'll tell you what I have. And you go, never mind the years of studies and all the rest. We've got Wikipedia. My children came up to me, and they said, when my children were about 7 and 6, they came to me and they said, Papa, that's the only French they know. They said, Papa, we don't want to go to school anymore. And I said, well, what's that about? And they said, well, we've had a meeting. You know you're in trouble when your kids have meetings with each other. And we thought, actually, why do we need to go to school? If we want to know anything, we can just Google it up. But this is the world we live in. This is a world where actually, if you think about it, your relationship with the people alongside you are changing because the information that they have is starting to challenge your expertise. The kind of conversations that I have with my doctor are fundamentally different from the kind of conversations we used to have. We are more informed, maybe badly informed. We have views, we have thoughts, we have opinions, which we used not to have. And this is happening to a lot of people in a lot of different occupations. And the question that it raises is, what's your value? Why do you exist? What is the value you bring to the people alongside you? What is the value of your leadership? Because it is more than the expertise you have. And even before the internet, the thing we look for from our doctors is not just expertise and answers, it's reassurance. It's a certain way of behaving towards us. It's this patient focus pledge which was taken earlier. So for me, there's a question here around actually what is our expertise and how does that lead us to lead in a different way. The third one I want to talk about briefly is what I call the attention trend. Now, the attention trend is really summed up by this slide. Now, I know it's a busy slide. Don't you start tweeting saying, gosh, that was a busy slide. I know it's a busy slide, and that's the point of the slide, okay? Because if you're faced with that much information, where do you focus? Where do you start to put your attention when there's so many stimuli around? And the answer is simple. Facebook. That's kind of where you go. Now, we are building communities of friends which are helping us to make huge small, which are helping us to make a multisensory world into a smaller one that we understand. Now, many people are amazed that if you are going on Google and you put President Barack Obama, if you are a registered Democrat, the likelihood is he has won the 2 debates hands down. According to Google. If you're a registered Republican, he has lost the 2 debates really badly according to Google. Now, the reason you don't get the same results is because of a little cookie which has been embedded in your computer through your searches, and Google knows what it is you might be interested in. Google has narrowed the field of human knowledge to one it believes is relevant to you. Now, this is really good if you're looking for a plumber. Because if you're looking for a plumber, and you live in Atlanta, you don't really want the search results for the plumber in London. That might just be too expensive. Trust me, not that much if you're in London and you want to do it the other way around. Okay? I mean, I've just had some plumbing work done. But the point is that actually we are starting to narrow our field in order to be able to cope with the amount of knowledge that is around. We are starting to trust fewer people in a circle of friends. It is more than it might have used to be, but it is a lot less than the opportunities that are offered. Now, for leaders, especially those who ban Facebook in the workplace, there is an interesting question, which is how do they follow you if they don't even know you're there? Actually, if you do not belong to that circle of influence, if you have no place, if you have not been given the trust to belong to that circle of influence, how do you impact people? How are you going to generate the energy necessary for those people to want to follow you? And the final question, the final trend that I want to look at before I try to see what we can do about it is what I call the democratic trend. Now, I call it the democratic trend not because of some political idea, but mainly because actually organizations have changed fundamentally from what used to be a solid world where everybody knew their place to an incredible dotted world where it is really hard to know who's the boss. Now, take me. I went to India. I was doing some work in India a few weeks ago. I had to get a business visa. I went to the desk at the consulate and said, I need a business visa. The lady says, oh, that's fine. You have all the necessary paperwork. There's only one thing missing, which is a letter from your company allowing you to go. I said, well, that's great. Just give me a pen and some paper. I'll write one now. And she said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, I'm my company. I'm a French person. We enjoy our own company. I'm a company of one. I am my own business, so I can write myself a letter allowing myself to go. That is just fine. She said, oh my goodness, that's why we shouldn't let French people into England. They just mess up the process. Now in the US, if you look at employment data, you are still separating it into agricultural and non-agricultural. Like these are the only two sectors available to you now. We have to catch up with the world of work, which is fundamentally different. Who do I work for? Well, my guess is ACCP, whomever pays the bill. Maybe that's true. Maybe you, because if you're not happy, maybe the bill won't get paid, so maybe you're my bosses. And if you extend it all the way, they're probably my kids, because at the end of the day, they spend the money, so they're going to send me to work. We don't know in this world who is responsible for what. Now, for leaders, this is a big challenge. Because actually, whether we like it or not, at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, as leaders, we still have one thing left to us. We can turn around to the person and say, do it because I tell you. If in this world you do this, nobody has to do anything. How do you lead when actually you don't have this positional power over people anymore? What does leadership look like when we remove the last bit which was available to you? Now, these are my 4 questions for leaders today. These are the 4 questions that lead me to think that leadership today has to be different. And I sum it up with this. Now, this is a big moment for me. You have to remember, English is not my mother tongue. I was not born an English speaker. I wasn't born a speaker of anything, to be fair. But I had to learn English. So this is big for me. This is what it means. 6 months it took me to come up with those 4 words. I'll do it again. There you go. Now what it means that our understanding of leadership is dead. Our understanding of what it means to lead is dead. Why? Because we are being challenged at the very core of what it meant to lead. Our experience is irrelevant to the people along us. Our expertise becomes less relevant. Our efforts become irrelevant if we are not in their circles of friends. Our power, the very essence of what we thought it meant to lead, is becoming irrelevant in terms of the position it holds. So our models of leadership are being challenged. So what do we do? What do we do? Let me offer you some thoughts around where I think we can go. The first thing to remember is this: our need for leader is the same as it ever was. That has not died. That has not gone. We want to be led. We want the people who are going to take us through our life. We want the people who are going to impact on us. And it is still fundamentally based on a relationship from a person to another. And by relationships, I mean deep, real relationships, not the kind that we get these days. This is an email I got from Amazon in the UK, amazon.co.uk. And Amazon writes to me. I buy a lot of books, obviously, that's my job. So I buy a lot of books, and Amazon regularly writes to me and says, Emmanuel, they call me Emmanuel, it's a groovy West Coast business. No Mr. Gobillot there. Gee, Emmanuel, we know, I can't do the American accent. Emmanuel, we know you so well. we have a relationship. And in fact, we know you so well that we think there are books that you should buy and we're going to recommend them for you. And I tell you what, I know that I'm going to enjoy those books. I know it for sure because I wrote 2 of them. I know they're good. I also know there is something fundamentally wrong when you have to buy your own books, okay? But here is Amazon. Amazon is saying we have a relationship. They call it customer relationship management. The only bit that's true is I'm their customer. We have no relationship. I don't want to be managed. You think you know stuff through algorithm. It's not what I mean when I say leadership is about relationships. There is something human to human about a relationship. There is something that understands there's not that many Emmanuel Gobillots in the world, and maybe the name of the guy on the cover is the same person as the guy we're sending the email to. That you can't do with an algorithm yet. So how do we have, oh, this is a brain cell. No, I am not a surgeon or anything at all. I just think it's cute. That's why I put it there. I just think this is really cute. Now, the reason I put this there is simple. How do we relate to each other? Well, the thing is, it's not logical. It's not rational. It's not purely emotional either. It's kind of a bit of both. Now, I always worry when speakers say, oh, let me tell you what we now know about the brain. I worry on 2 fronts. First of all, most of the speakers who tell you that know nothing about the brain. And my understanding is actually we know a lot less than they pretend we know about the brain. So I'm not going to fall into that trap, especially with that those people on stage who can correct my medical understanding at any point in time by just throwing themselves at me and removing me. So let me tell you this. All I know is that we don't ourselves understand why we follow somebody. It just kind of happens. I call it a sort of emotional logic. We just follow because it feels right. So let's try to unpack what this is the brain. Well, I know this is not the brain. I just think that to anybody who is not medically trained, showing organs in the morning on a Sunday is just gross, okay? So I'm not, I know a lot of people make but I just can't cope with the blood and stuff. So I just thought that looks like a brain. I thought I was going to go for this for a while, but even that looked like the skull has been removed and bits are still there. And I thought that was gross too. So I'll stick with the cauliflower, bear with me. But if I try to understand what's going on in a brain, okay, well, fundamentally what I can narrow it to is 3 questions. There are 3 questions that are going through our mind when we think about followership. Now, this is the right season in the US right now. You are in the voting season. These are the questions that I think people are wondering about when they're thinking about choosing a leader, when they're thinking about following someone. There are some to do with values, some to do with the character of the person, and others to do with the achievement of the person. The first question is something like this. Do they care about me? Do they care about people like me? Are they my kind of people? In the US, I think you say, oh, I share a beer with or something. Are they the kind of people I can relate to? The second question we have is, do they have what it takes to actually live by those values? Do the people in front of me have what it takes to be real, to actually do something with those values, or are they just kidding me because they want my vote, or they just want me to follow for a while? And then finally, we think about, can they make a difference? Will they actually succeed in walking the walk? Are they actually going to succeed? Now, I've got 3 questions and 3 offers for you of ideas as to how you may be able to impact the people around you when they're thinking those questions to do with your values, your character, and your achievement. Let's deal with the first one. There are 2 words that will help you when you try to live by a set of values for your followers. The first one is the word compassion. The second one is the word hope. For us to be able to know whether you share our values, we have to know that you care. And we have to know that you can provide us with hope that things are going to be different, better, or maybe the same. But the hope that you have answers. Now, I use compassion rather than empathy. I know a lot of people in business always say, oh, leaders should have empathy. Empathy is intellectual. The trouble with empathy is knowing how somebody feels. Now, to know how somebody feels doesn't really help in doing much about it. In fact, it can also be destructive because it means if you know how they feel, you can manipulate it. So I thought, well, maybe the answer is sympathy. Well, sympathy is great because sympathy is feeling how somebody else feels, which is great because you have an emotional understanding of how they feel. Now, the trouble is, though, if you start to feel how they feel, you might not be able to get out of it. So if there's a fire in this room and everybody is panicking, and I get that sense of panic, I am of no help to you. I just want one person not to panic so they can point us to the exit. So sympathy is important, but it's not there. Compassion, for me, is what takes us to the next level. Compassion is our ability to not just understand and feel, but actually to take somebody somewhere else. And to take them somewhere else means to take them in a place of hope. I define hope, as Snyder does, as goal times willpower times way power. Hope is about knowing a destination and having a will and a way to take somebody there. Now, let me tell you how you can do this. You can do this by thinking about your value. In the world that I pointed to, where those trends are happening, you cannot give clarity, you haven't got any. You don't know what's going to happen next, nobody does. But what you know is you can have a view. You can have a way. You can have a goal. You can have an opinion. You can have what I call a proposition. And branding people say, well, the way you get to a proposition is simple. You take a truth about the world. You take a truth about yourself. You merge the two together and you have a proposition for the world. So let me try this one out for you. Now, this is one I could find in the medical field. This is a fact about the world. People are afraid of disease. I am yet to meet somebody, and maybe you do know people like that, I don't, who say, wow, bring on the next one. Gee, give me that cold, you know? It doesn't happen like this. We are all worried about disease. Now, we're worried about disease. Now, how about if you're a pharma company, you can say, actually, we are the biggest investors in R&D. That is true. You can check it from our annual report. We invest more in R&D than anybody else in the world. Now, you bring those two facts together, and you've got GSK when they said, we are disease's biggest enemy. Now, this is not an ad for GSK, okay? But this is simply a fact that if you work for GSK and you are told you are now belonging to a large pharmaceutical company, you will behave differently than if somebody says to you, you know what, I see myself as as disease's biggest enemy. It's a different set of language. It calls for a different set of behaviors. It calls for a different set of assumptions. Now, I don't know whether these are right or hold up to scrutiny, but you're going to have to work up your own. You're going to have to start working up your idea of what is my proposition to the world? What is it that I offer the world? Because that's what people are going to look at when they're going to look at the values you bring, which is their first question of leadership. And if there is one thing I need you to remember, that's why I put an elephant on it. There's only really one thing which underpins this entire speech, and it's this question. This question, which I believe leaders need to ask themselves over and over again: have I made this person feel stronger and more capable? I don't mean happy. I don't mean well. I just mean stronger and more capable. My little boy George wanted to learn how to swim when he was little. He didn't want to get in the swimming pool, though. That's an issue. Now, maybe it's because I'm French, but at some stage you have to push the child, right? That's how we do it. Now, of course, you make sure the mother is there or whatever, you know. Don't start phoning social services and anything. But the idea is that George, when he went into the water the first time, he didn't like it. But I knew my intent was right, and I knew that his desire was strong. And so my question was, am I making him feel stronger and more capable? Is he going to turn back someday and say, that was a good moment for me, because I learned to swim? So that's the question we need to bring ourselves when we think about the values that we bring, when we think about the proposition we need to build. Let me go on to character. Now, remember, when I say character, it's the question that people have, which says, do they have what it takes? Do they have what it takes to do right by those values? Now, here are a few words for you. The first one is asperity. It means grit. We want our leaders to stand for something. We're going to want them to have grit, resilience, persistence. Not to just be always kind and always soft and right. We want them to be a bit rough, to stand for something. We want them to speak well. Leadership is about language. The only tool a leader has is language, the ability to impact, the ability to influence through the words they say. We're going to want them to have integrity. We want to know that they mean what they say. And then finally, we want them to be able to make things simple for us. Not simplistic, not silly, just simple. Let me try to bring those four again together and give you some ideas as to what you might be able to do. Now, here is the problem. The more uncertain the world is, the more certainty we crave, the more certainty we want as people. Now, you don't know what the world is going to be. So here is an option. In network theories, we call this punctualization versus depunctualization. The idea is that a car is a car as long as it works. The day it stops working, you realize it's not actually a car. It's 2,500 bits, and one of them is not working. And you don't know which one. The only way I can remove the stress of the car not starting is not just by telling you which part is broken, is by bringing the parts together again, is by repunctualizing the car into one object. This is another example of what I mean by simplicity. If you're trying to get people mobilized about the environment, you can spend hours trying to explain to them what is happening to the environment. Or you could show them this. And you show them this and they go, oh, how much do you want? That's what the WWF, and I don't mean the wrestling guys, that's what the WWF has been doing for years. Put a panda on it and people get mobilized. So the question to us is, what's your panda? What is it that people are going to get when they meet you? What is it that they're going to see and go, yes, that person can do it? Now, that's when rhetoric comes in. The ability to build stories that are coherent, that are credible, that are compelling. Hollywood does it very well. Can we have the man who makes the announcement speaking, or is that not a possibility? I just can't do it. I wish I had a deep American voice. If you see, this is a movie, I haven't seen this movie, the movie is called Fighting. But there is a line above the title and it says, some dreams are worth the fight. That's as deep as I can go. Some dreams are worth the fight. Now, you don't have to have seen that film to know the film. It's kind of Rocky with a better looking guy. That's my take on it. I'm just imagining young guy, not very rich, he's going to fight for it, going to work hard, the American dream, going to kind of get the girl but not quite in the middle because we still have a half an hour to go, and then he moves on and gets into a bit of a fight, but through sheer determination he makes it at the end, right? That's the film, okay? You know it's a different film from that film. Fired Up, 2 guys, 300 girls, you do the math. Now, this says to me, not an anniversary evening film, yeah? Not a first date movie. In fact, I don't want to go and see that movie because I don't want to be seen to see that movie. That's a DVD movie, all right? And just because you are a healthcare professional, I've got that one for you. He was dead, but he got better. Now try to do that. Now that's what I'm talking about. That's what I want my surgeon to do for me. This is when you kill the hero and have to make a sequel, right? That's the Dallas story, I guess. But here is the point. The point is that in one strapline, Hollywood has told us a story. In one strapline, they've managed to appeal to memories and histories that we have, which makes our world credible. And so my point is, what's your strapline? What's your film? How are you going to tell me what you're about? And again, we go back to a simple story. Who are we? I guess that's me. That could be you, depending on where you're from. I guess that's most of you. I guess that's all of us. But who are we? Who are you and who are we? Where are we going and why are we going there? Now, if you can answer those 3 questions for you and what you're trying to do in the world, then I can start to follow you. Because I know I'm being taken somewhere and I understand it. My world is repunctualized. My world comes together again. And you have to do this short. This is a stripe line. This is not a long film. Yeah? This is just the poster. Now let me leave you with the last one, which I call achievement, our ability to have an impact for real rather than just intentions. Two things: measurements and actions. Leaders have to do something. Leaders have to give us the ability to lead us from the front. That's why we like our leaders to be in front rather than behind. Now, if you think you're a leader, turn around every now and again, because if there's nobody behind, you're not leading anybody. So that's a good test too. Can you keep them up with you sometime? Now, the idea of measurement and action is that actually you have to talk to people. Now, most businesses suffer from what I call the Elvis fallacy. This idea that there's a little less conversation, a little more action, please. CEOs that I meet love Elvis. They should all have this tattooed, because they all go around going, please, a little less conversation, a little more action, please. What they forget is you can only have effective actions with history and conversations. The only way I understand what you mean is if we have some sense of shared history, and the only way we can get shared history is through conversations. The reason why most CEOs get really worried and said, well, actually, they just don't get it. The reason they don't get it is because you've never spoken to them about it, because you've been going on about a little less conversation, a little more action. So actually, if you want to take people with you, you're just literally going to have to be with them. And there's 4 things you have to care about. The first one is discovery. This is Dr. House. I understand he's not a real doctor. I also understand that lupus is the only thing that he seems to care about, because whatever episode it is, when it gets complicated, they just say it's lupus. I tell you what, I don't know what lupus is, but I know I don't want that. Because that's the one they can't do much about. That's the sad episodes when they have to tell the wife he ain't coming back. So I don't want that lupus stuff. That is no good. The reason I put a doctor on this is because doctors are fantastic at this. Discovering together, what does a fully functioning human being look like? This is the sessions that are happening in parallel when people are sharing with each other their knowledge and are saying, look, let me tell you about what I discovered. Now, this is important to do with your people, whatever walk of life you're into, because then they understand the basis of the challenges we face, but also they can think about actually the positives that are happening in our organization. Once you've discovered, you have to dream. What could it be if we were always operating at that level? Having dreamt, you need to design a way to get there and leave them in charge of their destiny. Leaders are not in control. They are in charge, but they're not in control. It's fine if you get people to understand where you want to take them. So these are my recommendations: compassion, hope, asperity, rhetoric, integrity, simplicity, measurement, action. My goodness, it spells something. You know, when I ask people, what do you look for in a leader? They always answer charisma. Every single time they say charisma. I said, define charisma for me. They can't. We don't know what it is. All we know is that the Greeks came up with the word, and they say it's a gift from God. Well, in leadership terms, it's not a gift from God. It's a gift from followers. If we see those things in action, we give leadership. And that's why your followers matters, because they're the ones who offer you leadership. Because you have ignited that emotional logic I was talking about. So, what are the 3 things I wanted to say? Well, I guess the first one was, leadership is about releasing the discretionary effort of others in the context they find themselves in, by igniting their emotional logic through the charisma you can bring to the job you do. Let me leave you with a number. I want to leave you all with that number. This is an important number to me. This is 14,600. I don't know if you think it's a big number or a small number, but this is the number of days on average you have left to live. Now, I can see a bit I've been generous, so don't. And there's some kids that are bringing the average down. Count yourself lucky. Now, why do I give you this number? I give you this number because we did a piece of research back in 2003 in the US. We asked 1,000 people over the age of 65, if you could have your time again, what would you do differently? Here are the 3 most common answers we got. I would take time and ask the big questions. I would be more courageous in life and in love. And I would try to live with a purpose, make a difference. Now, the great news for the people on the stage with me is they do that each and every day. And for that, we thank them. Because actually, these are the people who help us and who make a huge difference. But for many of us, our search through life is, how do I answer those 3 questions for me? And so, my question to you is, why wait? Why take the time? Because the thing I know is tomorrow, probabilities are on my side. The world is going to turn pretty much the same as it turned today. The only main difference tomorrow is this: there's one less. One less. And then another one. If I can be of any help on the journey, you can find me everywhere. My promise to you is, if you contact me, I won't charge you. If you stalk me, I'll ignore you. But that's the worst that's going to happen. Please get in touch. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure and an honor to speak. Thank you, Mr. President.